good field. So the Tanzanians, who we're all looking at to see how they're going to do it, and the main British guys will be watching each other and seeing who's going to make that Olympic team that we're not really sure how it's going to be selected, but we'll talk about that later.
Meanwhile, they're still pouring through the start. And indeed, the two starts take about 7 or 8 minutes to clear. But it's a marvellous piece of organisation. Those are the slower runners streaming across the far side of Blackheath Common. Meanwhile, the starters on the slow area. Well, I find it very hard work in getting through the gates there, but they're being released now, and it's marvellous the way this is organised, just holding them back so they can go freely through, and there's no traffic jam at all.
Bobbing and weaving their way, carrying their banners, letting the world know that this is their big day. Months of preparation, wondering now whether it's been enough. Vaseline on all the working parts, one hopes, and some of them still wearing their plastic macs because it is a chilling wind, which may affect the tail enders, the very slow runners, the very slow joggers, and those that have to walk part of the course. It may affect them later on. Plenty of energy at the moment.
Meanwhile, far ahead at Woolwich, two leading girls, and as we suspected, Mary Cotton, formerly Mary Stewart of Birchfield Harriers, taking Christiansen along. They're hoping to get near that world best. That's the 2-mile mark, and we'll give you the time in just a moment. Meanwhile, the pack still streaming through at the start, and the men in the elite race are approaching the mile mark. Those are the last runners in the experienced pack crossing the line as the leaders from that start approach the mile mark. Slower start, well, they're much more slowly away. They should take about some 8 or 9 minutes to clear. That's the roundabout at about half a mile. The underpass going through to the Blackwall Tunnel. And so we can join the head of the race now as the athletes begin to settle down. Among that leading group is number 6, Chris Bunyan of Southampton AC. Kanga there wearing number 2. Also at there, Dave Murphy of Liverpool Harriers, who's back from Louisville in the States. There's Christiansen of Norway wearing us. There's Bari, Kjeld of Denmark, Kjeld Johansen. Number 2 there at Kanga. We expected him to try and cut it out. And we should have the mile time very shortly.
In the green shorts there, that's Grenville Wood of Australia, trying to qualify for the Australian team, wearing 2:20. The Vikings up at the tail end. I think they're going to walk the first mile, but they are the tail enders coming through the gate now. And as that pack unwinds, so they'll begin their long route home. About 26 miles to go, and they too are in good voice. myriad of bobbing heads.
Leaders there on the Halley-Tally shot, and they've gone through at a very steady pace indeed for the first mile, 5 minutes dead. Even pace running 5 minutes would bring them in 2 hours and 11 minutes approximately, but they're bound to speed up at some stage. But it's a sensible start because most of these athletes are very experienced and know they need to do the running in the later stages. Kanga there wearing number 2, always a front runner from Tanzania. Alongside him, Bari, fellow Tanzania. Grenville Wood of Australia in the green shorts. Number 29 is Berger of Norway. Magnani of Italy is right up there as well. He's wearing number 9. Dave Murphy of Liverpool Harriers in tremendous form in the States. Recently beat Bari over 10 miles. He's only run one marathon. Murphy is wearing 8. He's among that leading pack. His only marathon, he was second in Sydney in just over 2 hours 11 minutes. Wearing 20 there is Lavenborg of Denmark. So a lot of the overseas athletes in that leading group, and a word from Brendan Foster.
Well, all the discussion yesterday was about the Tanzanians, how fast they were going to go, because we've seen them run 2 hours 6 pace, which is 2 minutes faster than the world record for a marathon in marathons recently that they've been running. So everyone was saying that, you know, if the Tanzanians go off quickly, we're going to let them go. But it looks like they've gone off very conservatively today, and all the main British contenders who are in there for a place in the Olympic marathon later in the year in Los Angeles, within that group, they've noticed that the pace is okay, so they're starting to relax. They're starting to look at the Tanzanians to see if there's anything that they can learn about them, see if there's anything they can do about the pace. But I think this group is big enough, which suggests that even the second mile, it hasn't really increased in pace. And the main contenders already are poised in that second, just behind the leading group, behind Magnani of Italy in the blue vest, number 9, and right next to Grenville Wood of Australia. But Charlie Spedding, Dave Long, Chris Bunyan, Mike Grattan there on the outside, last year's winner, and the red vest and the black shorts. So I think they're quite happy. Right next to him is Jerry Helm, who was second in last year's marathon. I think they're very, very pleased so far that the Tanzanians have run conservatively.
Up there as well is number 8, Nick Braun, and also Jim Dingwall, who's wearing number 14, the Scottish athlete with the beard. And that leading pack, there's about 20 or 30, contain all the fancied runners. Actually, they're approaching the 2 mile point at Woolwich Barracks, and they've just gone through, and the time 10 minutes 10 seconds. So the second mile slower still, 5 minutes for the first, 5.5 for the second. So it's very, very, very conservative.
It may be a problem for Grenville Wood, the man in the green shorts wearing 2:20. He was the winner of the Australian marathon in 2 hours 15:50, and the selector suggested it's not fast enough for his Olympic selection. He's got to go 2:14 or faster. So he'll be hoping that Ikanga or Zachary Barry, either of the Tanzanians, will pick the pace up a little bit to give him a fighting chance. He won't want to run it from the front, but they'll want to pick it up at some time.
Woolwich Barracks with its parade ground, and they're approaching the first feeding station. And of course the wise ones will take time out to get as much liquid on board as early as possible.
Actually, these Tanzanians, I've seen them running 4:40 and well under 10 minutes for the first 2 miles of a marathon. And I wonder if they're a little bit subdued, because I was with them yesterday when their manager learned that Juma Ikanga, who is one of the world's leading marathon runners, found out that his roommate, Michael Macania, who'd done 2:12 for a marathon very recently in Vienna, was actually shot dead out training in Tanzania on Thursday. He was mistaken for a burglar, and they couldn't believe it when they read in The Guardian yesterday that this man had been killed. Now, I wonder if that's had any effect on them, because they are very, very sensitive people.
Saw a glimpse of the bird paw gun captured at the siege of 1826. won't bother the marathon runners as they approach the point where they swing left into John Wilson Street, and just beyond that, the point where the two packs converge. Bari moving very smoothly, Kanga's going well. Number 6, Chris Bunyan of Southampton at University in America. 9 is Magnani, famous Italian athlete, just beaten in a photo finish by Charlie Spedding in America last season. Meanwhile, as the readers pound their way past Woolwich Barracks, the first feeding station, the masses behind go along at their own pace. And indeed, that pace is dictated by the number of runners. There's no question of these athletes going too fast too soon.
There's also no question of any of these people even thinking about the Olympic Games in Los Angeles. They'll all be interested in their own performance today and their own progress in the marathon. But you're absolutely right that they can't do anything about the pace because there's a solid wall of bodies ahead of them. So all they've got to do is just drift along at the right pace. And actually that's quite good for them because in the later stages when it strings out, it means that they've hopefully got some energy left and they're not going to hurt too much in the latter part of the race.
Actually, most of these athletes are sponsored, of course, and it's estimated that they'll raise some £4 to £5 million for various charities. The biggest group is well, nearly 1,000 running for the Sports Aid Foundation, and there's something right about every few years these fun runners trying to help our top athletes and sportsmen, amateur sportsmen, with their preparation training.
It's even getting competitive as to how many runners you've got in your sponsored group. The Marathon group reckon they've got as many out for muscular dystrophy as the Sports Aid Foundation. There's Jimmy Savile with his group, but there is a tremendous giving today. 4 to 5 million. There can't be many occasions when that amount of money can be raised in one single day, and tremendous atmosphere prevails when all these runners know that they're gaining something themselves, but they're also giving out.
Well, back at the start, the last athletes are through, and the clean-up process begins. It's a massive operation. A masterpiece of organisation. 1:4:16. It's Colin Hassel. Comes from Guildford. How far he'll go like that, goodness knows, but my word, it must be uncomfortable.
Be some effort if he gets all the way around, I'll tell you that.
There, what has been described as the 8th wonder of the world. Opened last week by Her Majesty the Queen, the flood barrier on the Thames. The athletes won't quite see that, but they do run alongside the Thames, and Woolwich docks now disused, passing Warspite Road. And in fact, in the Royal Navy, until recent years, there's always been a battleship called Warspite, going back to the Hearts of Oak. Now this is the point where the two packs converge, but of course the slower pack, which will be running on the near side of the road, hasn't arrived there yet. And it looks as if there's a slight break developing. In fact, the pedal is probably going down slightly after that fairly modest first 2 miles, and both the Tanzanians are up there with the leaders, but they are beginning to press it now. Grenville Wood of Australia, Bari of Tanzania, Ikanga of Tanzania. Also there is Lavenborg of Denmark. Number 29 is Berger of Norway. And this could be quite a significant move. One of the wheelchair competitors who started 5 minutes before on the slower route. And the girls, of course, started some 10 minutes before the men. And we're told that Christiansen of Norway and Mary Cotton of Birchfield are way out in front. This is where the two routes come together, and for about another half mile to 1 mile they run on either side of the dual carriageway before joining up. The fast athletes, they went through the first mile in 5 minutes. The second mile was running 5:10, and they've just run the third mile, as I suspected, very much faster. So the screw is slightly being turned. 4:46 for the third mile.
That's stretching them a little, I fancy. The Norwegians, incidentally, using this for their Olympic trial, as well as Great Britain and the Australians. So it's a real racing occasion, is this? Something under 2:12 will be expected for the Olympians.
Very, very international field, this. There are some Chinese in this race as well, by the way. And there's 26, Liang. Su Liang. He's got a best time of 2:13. And very shortly, the leading girls in the elite race will be Cutty, Sark on the 6 mile point. That's looking up the road from the Cutty, Sark, just beyond the 6 mile point. And this leading group really are beginning to stretch out. That third mile in 4:46 has put paid to quite a number already, who've either elected not to go with the pace or can't go with the pace. That's Ikanga leading. Bari in the red banded vest. Between them, Wood of Australia, then Berger of Norway. So in fact, we can just go ahead and preview what the athletes are going to see.
The prime meridian here at Greenwich is celebrating its centenary year. As every schoolboy knows, a meridian is a circle which passes over both north and south poles, and the points on the surface of the Earth immediately below form the lines of longitude. Bradley's meridian, the line first used, was found to be 19 feet out of true, but is still used on Ordnance Survey maps. Below the Royal Observatory, founded in 1675, is the Queen's House, which was built for Anne of Denmark in 1617, opposite the Royal Naval College, originally Greenwich Hospital, designed by Sir Christopher Wren, who had been told to leave unobstructed the view of the River Thames. Our runners passed by here on their way to the Cutty Sark, the last and the most famous of the tea clippers. It was built at Dumbarton on the River Clyde, and her name comes from Robert Burns' poem Tam O'Shanter. The figurehead is that of a white witch catching hold of a horse's tail. Inside now is a museum housing a marvellous collection of carved painted figureheads and prints showing the Cutty Sark as she used to be. When launched 115 years ago, she was meant for the tea trade between China and Britain. Shortly after, though, the Suez Canal was opened, which meant that the steamers were faster, so she took on the wool trade between London and Australia, cutting the journey time of other ships by weeks. Moored close by is Gypsy Moth IV, the yacht in which Sir Francis Chichester circumnavigated the world single-handed in 1966 and 7.
The leading men still some 2 miles away from that point, but the leading girls, who started 10 minutes earlier, will be approaching the Cutty Sark very shortly. That's Bari on the right as we look in, and Ikanga of Tanzania being tracked by the Chinese Su Liang. And certainly the pace increasing all the time. Berger of Norway in the all blue, and the tiny figure alongside him wearing number 6 is Chris Bunyan, who's the first of the British athletes at the moment.
Mike Karifalidis, I think, the wheelchair athlete, trying to keep up with the leading runners and keeping going well. Haringey athlete and an experienced wheelchair marathon man. Meanwhile, the pack is still pouring past Woolwich Barracks, with with its magnificent facade. Spirit's still high. Great act of faith here.
This a sight one wouldn't have dreamt of just a few years ago. Which gives those of us who've been involved in track and field for years enormous pleasure.
One often used to wonder about one's own motivation. It was always sort of high-level competition. And when you talk to these people and you say, hey, you know, why do you do it if there's 15,000 people ahead of you? And they all come up with the same kind of answer, that it's the challenge of the thing that really keeps them going and makes them interested in this event.
Patrick Musters wants to be remembered. We certainly remember him.
And so, as the stragglers go past the 2-mile point, the leading ladies are now approaching Cutty Sark. They've just gone through 6 miles, and the two leaders still the same two. The two expected, Ingrid Christiansen and Mary Cotton. They've not gone too far away, and the time is fairly quick. Christiansen is looking for a fast time, and she's believed to be capable of setting a new world best.
This is the first time I've seen pacemaking in a marathon take place as efficiently as this, because Mary Cotton, formerly Commonwealth 1500 metres champion, who's recently come back to international athletics, has agreed to take Ingrid Christiansen through the halfway stage in 1 hour 11 minutes, which is on schedule for Joan Benoit's world best of 2:22, which is considerably faster than Greta Waitz ran last year here in London. Right back from the leading women, the leading men are still increasing their pace. You can tell by the fact that the gaps are opening, and the two Tanzanians who train a lot together when they're back in Tanzania in the training camps are quite happy rolling along there. Ikanga doesn't like anyone in front of him. He'll tolerate his friends right next to him, but apparently, according to people like Grenville, would have tried to run ahead of him. They just have absolutely no chance.
The leading girls are now some 20 yards ahead of the chasing pair. F1, Ingrid Christiansen. F24, Mary Cotton. Mary, the former Commonwealth Games 1500 metres champion. And the timing car at this point, of course, can't get round Cutty Sark, so it takes a shortcut and picks them up as they take this little detour.
The crowd growing as they get nearer to central London. It'd be lovely if Mary Cotton can recapture some of her former glory. Remember, she's the sister of Ian Stewart and Peter Stewart, that remarkable Stewart family, run for Birchfield. If she can hang on to Ingrid Christiansen, it will be a tremendous race, and it will certainly be a lifetime best for her. Here she is, Christiansen on the left, Mary Cotton on the right.
They're aiming for 1 hour 11 minutes, the halfway point, and they're on schedule for that. See the third and fourth go through.
Sarah Rowell, I think, with the headband.
Leaders back on the main route again now. And they're already, those four, a long, long way ahead. Well, back to the men, and they're approaching, well, about 5 miles, I suppose, now. In fact, they should be just beyond it. We're not out of 5 mile time. The two Tanzanians clear. Being chased by Bunyan. David Murphy's up there as well. The man who beat Barry over 10 miles in America recently.
Interesting, these two Tanzanians, Ikanga, who wears 2, he's home-based in Tanzania. He lives at Arusha, which is Philbert Bayi's birthplace. Philbert Bayi being the man, he's a great hero, a Commonwealth 1500-metre runner who broke a world record in Christchurch. And Zachariah Barry, who wears 15 on the right, he's based at the University of Texas at El Paso. but returns to Tanzania, to altitude, as Brendan Foster was saying, to train in their training camps, right on the in the shadow of Mount Kilimanjaro. Absolutely ideal conditions, hot and dry, but at about 6,000 feet, and both these men are in cracking form.
And as they race their way on towards the 6 mile mark, the athletes wisely, the fun runners, taking on board liquid at the first feeding station after just 2 miles. Crowd waiting there for the main race to come through. And some of the girls Jacobsen of Norway. Angela Ford. Angela Hearn rather just gone through. F27. Alison Goodham. Girls all running in the Women's 3As Championship, and also, of course, there are 3 Olympic places available.
Valerie Howe was 77, she went through. The Bracknell girls, 79. Annette Roberts, Borough of Hounslow, all the clubs will be there.
Jones approaching Cutty Sark. One of the Italian girls up there. Emma Scornage.
And Heidi Jacobsen of Norway just gone through, wearing 12, the 27-year-old, who's a 2:40 girl. 16th in the 83 New York Marathon. There she is.
Meanwhile, at the feeding station at 2 miles, the Kangaroo taking liquid on board, and no wonder. The 2 Tanzanians still cutting out the pace, and the pace is getting fast. 5 minutes the first mile, 5:10 the second, then suddenly they threw in 4:46. The 4th mile was run in 4:42, and the 5th mile in 4:52, and that's done the damage. So they threw 5 miles in 24 minutes 32 seconds. And now approaching the 6 mile mark. In the chasing group, we've got Nick Braun, Chris Bunyan, and David Murphy. The Army cleaning up at the feeding station. And certainly that first feeding station at 2 miles has been kept very, very busy indeed.
This is the less glamorous end of the thing, when you have to clean up after these runners have thrown water and drinks and orange juice and everything over you. And that's what happens, because I've spoken to people who do this job, and it looks like they have to get Army volunteers to do it these days. We used to get the Boy Scouts and the Cubs doing it in the Great North Run, but now they've got to force people to do this, because it's not a very pleasant task run.
That's the Royal Artillery doing a great job. They'll be looking out for the Gurkhas, though. I bet they give them a wave when they go through. The Gurkhas are here again. Cutty Sark coming up for these girls. And the men overtaking the back markers of the women. The 2 Tanzanians just threading their way through.
Due to the 6 mile time, they went through 5 miles to 6 miles in 4:43, so this pace is now very, very hard indeed. And 6 miles, 29 minutes, 15 seconds. They're heading at the moment for something in the region of 2 hours 9, which would be a course record. Meanwhile, we've got a walker at Blackheath. He's the last man in the race. Patrick Fury, London Transport, comes from North Mims. Actually, he's got a best marathon time of 3 hours 1 minute, which is quite respectable, but he's not on course for that today.
I think he might overtake a few before the end of the day, though.
The men now having rounded Cutty Sark, and these Tanzanians a daunting sight for the chasing group. And for the British athletes in this, well, they've got a very important question to ask themselves, because can they afford to chase the Tanzanians when Olympic places are at stake? They're racing each other, which is much more important, really, from their point of view, than chasing the Tanzanians. And it's significant that Britain's 2 fastest marathon runners at the moment, Jeff Smith, who's our fastest marathon runner ever from Liverpool Harriers, now based in the States, and Hugh Jones, who set the course record in this London Marathon 2 years ago and has been in fast form recently. Those 2 athletes have elected not to run and to rest on the times they've clocked already. So the athletes here could be running for a single place.
That's the dilemma, because not only does that mean that the Britons have to finish in the first 3 here, but it also means that the time they run is important. And it's interesting to me to watch the 3 Britons who are following these 2 Tanzanians are all American-based athletes. There's Adrian Leake from Cardiff, there's Dave Murphy from Liverpool Harriers, and there's Chris Bunyan from Southampton. But they're all based in the States. They all run against this Zachary Barry quite often. And they're looking at each other. They know what kind of pace they've got to run. And the other Britons, the home-based Britons, Mike Grattan, Charlie Spedding, Kevin Forster, and people like that seem to be off that second group. So already there's a race on, and there's 2 races. There's a race for the winner, but there's a race for the British team.
Last lady going through Woolwich Barracks after 2 miles, an Italian girl, Antonio Baldisarotto. She's aiming for a time of about 3 hours 30 minutes, but I suggest it's going to be more like 5 hours. The faster male athletes now caught the girls, the slower girls who started 10 minutes before. But the leading 2 girls, Christensen and Cotton, way out in front.
The good club runners here know what they're doing. Very experienced. Conditions good.
The field already stretched out in the first few miles with some, 5 miles between the leaders and the last athlete. And that's after just over 7 miles. All these fixed points important to the athletes, all checking their times and making sure that they're keeping on a sensible schedule. Meanwhile, the leaders, they're about a mile in front of those runners, and my word, they're moving. 33:58 at 7 miles, and that is at world record pace.
Ikanga on the left, incidentally, is the man who missed the race 2 years ago. He arrived at Heathrow just as the race was starting. Great pity. It's only his 6th marathon, but everyone fears him. Tremendously talented, only 5 feet 4.5. But he and Barry will battle it out. There'll be no holding hands at the end of the race in this race, I fancy.
Actually, the last mile has just been running 4 minutes 43 seconds. So they're knocking out even pace miles pretty well. They've gone in the last 5 miles 4:46, 4:44, 4:52, 4:43, 4:43. And this is doing some damage too, because they're beginning to stretch away.
those miles of 4:43 are way under the pace that you'd have to run to shatter the world record. But I wouldn't get too excited yet, because this is the way the Africans love to run. They like to go fast as they feel like. They like to run comfortably fast. But it's really the last 3 or 4 miles of the marathon where the difference is told. And I think there's two attitudes here. I think Ikanga is one of the world's leading marathon runners, and I'm right next to him, Zachary Barry, who runs an awful lot of races. In fact, ran in Rotterdam and finished second in Rotterdam in 2:11 4 weeks ago. So I think you've got two men, one who's running to win the race, and I think Barry is almost out for a long training run, because the preparation that he's had for this race isn't exactly ideal. A 10-mile race in America 2 weeks ago and a marathon in Rotterdam 4 weeks ago. And Ikanga is the one who they consider as a real chance in the Olympic Games, and this is his last marathon before the Olympic Games. So Ikanga's quite happy to have his teammate Barry run next to him, but I don't really think he considers Barry as a real threat. And I wouldn't get too excited yet about the time, even though we're looking at it with interest, because the British runners are going to be running more sensibly. They're going to be looking at the time. They're going to be knowing what they have to do, and they're probably almost thinking now about ignoring these two Tanzanians.
Libby Pfeiffer, one of the girls just overtaken, a very good runner from Barnet Ladies, who are strongly represented here today. Kate Fitzgibbon too. So they're going through the tail enders. Pauline Watson was one of them, and really they're just past 8 miles now, the Tanzanians. Still the great landmark, the Cutty Sark. Club runners here.
All these athletes so far behind the Olympic quality that leads the field, but still running respectable times.
A few of the club vests going through. Epsom just gone through. The Gateshead vests, of course. Tipton up there. Some of them carrying the notes of the charities that they're running for as well. The Army stopping for a well-earned drink themselves. That's the Royal Artillery. An excellent job they've done. And all the feeding stations manned by volunteers, and some famous ones amongst them. An army of volunteers making today possible.
Famous club vests, recognisable. And these are nearly all club athletes, in fact. Quite capable of running the marathon well within 3 hours. Meanwhile, we've got news of the leading group now. And chasing Ikanga and Barry, Steve Bunyan, Dave Murphy, Adrian Leake, appearing for the first time in that leading group from Cardiff, and John Graham, who wears number 3 and runs for Birchfield. He's one of our best marathon runners. Scott, he's got a best time of 2 hours, 9 minutes, 28 seconds. You can spot them yourselves. Graham's wearing number 3, Leake is 31, Dave Murphy is number 8, and Bunyan is number 6. And they may be running a more sensible pace than the Tanzanians. But they've got to have the courage to keep in touch and not let them get away too far. 8 miles covered in 38 minutes, 48 seconds. So again, they're on pace for around 2 hours, 9 minutes. It's very fast indeed. And that 8th mile run in 4 minutes, 50 seconds. The athletes still streaming through at 6 1/4 miles at the Cutty Sark.
I think we've got a chef coming up. And a Mexican hat in the background. He's going to run.
Chef X350. And that is Dave Lyons, who we saw last year, wearing his chef's outfit. And I wonder if that's last year's pancake as well.
He's certainly tossing that pancake. And there's a British record for that as well. Held at the moment by a housewife. I think he's after that.
Was she running at the time?
Indeed. Just looking at the crowd watching this, it must be still quite chilly out there. They're out there in their anoraks. That breeze must still be quite a cool one. It's Dale Lyons, incidentally, that holds that pancake tossing record, 3 hours 9 minutes, and that was in the London Marathon of '82. And he holds his record. He tosses a 2-ounce pancake repeatedly in a 1.5 pound frying pan, does Dale. That's the record he's after his own today.
So from the 6-mile mark, we go up to the leaders, who are now out on the Surrey Dock roads, approaching 9 miles, and still the Tanzanians cutting it out. Grenville Wood is in that chasing group. Steve Bunyan, Dave Murphy, Adrian Leake, and John Graham. And so as the leaders go on their way, in case you've just joined us, let's recap on the story so far.
A world record field of 21,000 set off from 2 starts either side of Blackheath Common at 9:30 this morning and provided once again one of the most impressive sights in British sport. In one group were the less experienced women athletes, the slower men, and the men running a marathon for the first time. Ahead of them, their incredible journey of 26 miles, 385 yards. In the other group were the elite men, those with proven records over this classic distance, and many with their sights on the Olympics this summer. At the mile point, reached in 5 minutes, it was one of the favourites, Juma Ikanga of Tanzania, leading the way. But there, as you see, as always, it's not always serious, and there's one of the novelty runners, Colin Hassel, making life a little more difficult for himself. By 3 miles, the leading group was beginning to pull away, and it was here they passed one of the wheelchair competitors who'd started 5 minutes before the rest. At 3.5 miles, the elite group and the inexperienced runners merged, with Ikanga still leading. Meanwhile, the elite women, who'd started 10 minutes before the rest, were approaching the Cutty Sark between 6 and 7 miles, with the leaders Mary Cotton, formerly Mary Stewart of Birchfield Harriers, and Ingrid Christensen of Norway on the left here, and the Norwegian thought capable today of setting a new world record.
And the news from the ladies' race is that they are on cue for that. Meanwhile, the Tanzanians pounding their way through Surrey Docks. And the leading group, Steve Bunyan wearing number 6 from Southampton and Eastleigh. David Murphy wearing number 8, the Liverpool Harrier, based in America. Adrian Leake of Cardiff wearing 31. John Graham, number 3 from Birchfield. And Lavenberg wearing number 20, who is the Dane. And we've got a bride there going through Cutty Sark. Let's see if we can spot it who it is. Bride and groom. And they're both fellas, by the way. It's David Rutter is the bride, and the bridegroom, Malcolm Ellis. Malcolm Ellis from Elmbridge, and the bride, Dave Rutter from Sunbury-on-Thames.
Dave Rutter works for TV and radio. Malcolm Ellis, local government. One of several hundred local governments. There's about 750 unemployed. The biggest number of professions, 1,600 engineers. Or jobs relating to engineering.
What a carnival this has become. The annual trip around the sights of London. But the ultimate achievement, to finish a marathon. The pace not really important for these athletes. To finish, all important.
Well, the costumes are out again, and the sun is shining. They're in shadow now. That's going to lift them, I'm sure, just as the crowd are lifting them. And it's a great spiritual awakening for these people. I suppose the fitness fad began in sunny California. It started with hula hoops and was taken up by aerobics, and they've been hanging by their feet in gymnasia. But the one thing that stuck is jogging, and jogging has grown to the aspiration to run. And this, for many of these people, is the ultimate run. It's got to be their Everest, 26.2 miles. And 95% or more will finish. They may never run a marathon again, but they'll finish.
Well, from the masses at Cutty Sark to a lonely figure at the head of the race. And that is Ingrid Christiansen, the Norwegian, who is trying to set a new world ladies' best for the marathon. Starting 10 minutes ahead of the main field, she's now just come back onto the main road, having left Surrey Docks. Mary Cotton tried to stay with her to help her to reach a halfway target of 1 hour 11 minutes, and we suspect she is on course for that.
She's a very remarkable lady in many respects, David, as you well know. She ran in the World Cross Country Championships at Gateshead last year without realising or fully realising that she was 3 months pregnant. She's now had a baby boy, Gauta. He's 10 months old, and within a month of having that baby, she was running a 10-kilometre road race. So she's an astonishing lady. Before she gave birth, she was running up until 8 months, and then decided that it was getting a little uncomfortable, so she took up cycle racing twice a day. Astonishingly fit. She's 27. She's a medical researcher, ran 4th in the World Cross Country Championships in New York, and says that she needs very little time to recover. Unlike Greta Weitz, who needs a lot of time. It's why Greta's not running. She's saving herself for Los Angeles. But this girl out to establish herself as the #1, having already beaten Greta Weitz over the cross country and more recently in a 10-kilometre road race. So it's an astonishing lady that's leading at the moment, wearing one, Ingrid Christiansen of Norway.
Still streaming through at the 6-mile point, 6.25 miles to be accurate, at Cutty Sark.
Just be working my sponsors.
Magnificent clipper, landlocked of course, and one of the most famous landmarks in that part of London.
And a very speedy lady herself. Having given up the tea trade when the Suez Canal was open, went on to the wool trade.
Meanwhile, far ahead, the leaders are beginning to slow. They've gone through 10 miles now in 49 minutes and 3 seconds. But the last 2 miles have been 5 minutes 8 seconds and 5 minutes 7. So that savage pace between 3 miles and 8 miles is now beginning to slacken. Sights and sounds of the London Marathon, really quite remarkable.
There's Jimmy Savile. And he'll have a mass around him, I'm absolutely sure.
Hello, Mum.
The fun runners as inventive as ever with their costumes.
There are miles and miles now between the main group of athletes and the leaders. And still the Tanzanians together and approaching 11 miles. Not far away now from Tower Bridge. And who's the girl they're catching? I wonder if we can see who that is. It's one of the national squad in national uniform. and they're on their way to the 11-mile mark.
The speed they overtook Our Lady runner must have taken some lead out of the legs. They really shot past, opened up a massive gap very quickly. And yet here is the one event in track and field where the women are closing the gap on the men. 2.5-hour marathon running now possible for these women. And 3,000 women running today. They've taken up the challenge, and they really are closing the gap, are they not, Brent?
That's absolutely right, because in the last 10 years, the men's marathon times only improved by 10 seconds. And in the last 10 years, the women's marathons improved by about 20 minutes, you know, so there's an incredible improvement. And the coaches of the leading women are saying that, you know, the women can run under 2 hours 20, which would have been Olympic winning time only a few years ago. So they really are closing the gap. And there are some physiological reasons why that should be so. The fact that women have, you know, more body fat available to use in the later stages of races, and also because in the marathon the muscular strength, which is a factor in most track and field events, is not a factor as much in the marathon. So you know, maybe they will catch the men. I don't think so, but maybe they will.
I just heard Jimmy Peters wince when you said that. 2 hours 20 minutes for women running, when that was the great break-even point of the great runners of yesteryear.
Well, certainly the two leaders are slowing, but there's a check now on the leading group. Ikanga and Bari are away from Adrian Leake of Cardiff, David Murphy of Liverpool, Chris Bunyan of Southampton, Lavenberg of Denmark, and John Graham of Birchfield. And in fact, we also believe Magnani of Italy may well have joined the chasing group. But the question is, have the Tanzanians gone too fast in that early part of the race? The first 2 miles were slow, but then they went very, very quickly, and they've slowed down quite dramatically in the last 2 miles. Both run well over 5 minutes. This, the Cutty Sark shot. And meanwhile, we can go to the Tower Bridge camera, where just beyond the 11-mile mark, this is the leader, Ingrid Christiansen.
Very early in the race, Christensen dropped her arms and looked as though she was having some problems, but she's really got away now from Mary Cotton, and she is on target for quite a remarkable run. Over the bridge, look at the crowds now, out in their thousands. This is the London Marathon, as we expected.
Ingrid just beyond the 12-mile mark, and the key time for her will be the halfway stage. She's trying to get there in 1 hour 11 minutes, and that is fast. Now remember, this used to be the halfway point, but in fact the course has been changed. I believe it's faster than it was, with better road services in Dockland, both in Surrey and the Isle of Dogs, Dockland areas, and certainly the time should be a little bit quicker. It's questionable, though, whether conditions are quicker. It's a bright morning, but there is a strong wind, and it's not always helping. But the key time for her will be 1 hour 11 minutes at the halfway stage.
Magnificent shot.
The men will shortly be approaching Tower Bridge. It was thought they'd catch the leading lady at about 16 miles, and that seems to be about right. Meanwhile, Bari and Ikanga have gone through the next mile rather more quickly. It's 11 miles, between 10 and 11, they ran 4:52, and they threw 11 miles in 53:55, which is still on course for the fastest time ever run.
This great London landmark, packed with people. And the second of the woman is Priscilla Welsh. Priscilla Welsh wearing F2, and Priscilla Welsh, 39, the Nuneaton Harrier from Upper Dean in Huntingdonshire, coached by her husband David, and ran 2 hours 32:31 in the New York last October, which is the second fastest. Sarah Roll is with her. Two of our great hopes for the Olympics. Sarah Roll on the left, 21, the Dartford Harrier from Riash in Kent, coached by Cliff Temple, only been running 18 months.
In fact, as the two girls go over Tower Bridge, the leading men are not very far behind. They're running at an amazing pace. And certainly, well, fear is the great enemy of the marathon runner, but the Africans seem to sense no fear at all.
The biggest fear for the class distance runners is going too fast in the early stages. The biggest fear for the mass participant is completing the course. But, you know, I agree with that. I mean, the Africans really don't care too much about pace. And Barry, for example, I think he's just going to go and run as fast as he possibly can for as long as he can. And that's not really the way to approach a marathon.
One of the thoughts in Ikanga's mind may well be the fact that he was overtaken in the last 30 metres by Toshihiko Seko running in the Fukuoka marathon. And so he doesn't want to be taken on the line. He thinks that Seko will get one of the golds in the Olympic, one of the medals in the Olympic Games. He'll get another, and he doesn't know who the third will be, but he's got that in his mind that he was overtaken just in the last 30 metres.
Well, we're expecting the leading men through at any moment. Christensen, the leading girl, was over the bridge in just over an hour 5, and it looks to me as if the wind is causing problems there. Of course, it's quite an exposed part. The wind must be blowing straight into their faces, probably coming off the river slightly, and they were bending into the wind there. So probably the wind playing a part in the slowing of the race in Surrey Docks, where, of course, it is quite open. They've just gone, though, in the last mile in 4:41 and 58:36 for 12 miles.
Yes, there's no doubt it's going to be exposed from now on. They're over the bridge and on the Thames, and they'll cut right and go back into the Isle of Dogs, and where the buildings have been brought down, there's about 550 open acres, so that breeze will certainly affect them. But it's still a massive lead, and it's a tremendous demonstration of distance running by these Tanzanians.
Actually, we've had a reporter from out on the course. In fact, the middle part of that first half of the race was very, very fast because the wind was behind them. But they're now turning into wind. But of course, the course does twist and turn, so sometimes they'll be against the wind. But more often, we believe, they'll have a following wind. Now, that's the group behind it. Charlie Spedding is joined it. Also there, number 16, Marty McCarthy of Oxford City, a fancied athlete. Steve Kenyon's in that group. And we believe that is the second group now. It may just be the group behind that other mob of athletes, John Graham and Bunyan and Murphy and Leake.
And that's the leading wheelchair. That's Kevin Breen of Ireland. He's a 2-hour 38 man, and he and Mike Karafalidis were expected to have a great race together. Kevin Breen, the fastest man in the wheelchair race.
By the way, in that group as well that went through was Jerry Hallam, who was second last year. It was Peter Jones, the Cambridge Harriers were in that group as well. The leaders on their way, and let's see what the gap is like, and whether, in fact, that Charlie Spedding was leading a third group, and I think he was, actually. No, let's have a look. Well, Brendan Foster, a clubmate of Charlie Spedding's, and who trains with him daily, says that's not Charlie, and I believe Brendan's right. So, in fact, that third group we saw was led by Charlie Spedding. So that's the second group, the chasing group. They look remarkably relaxed, but there'll be no question, I don't think, of them running this out together. They like to win.
I'm sure many would like to be reminded that Huma Inkanga on the left there is the fella that did battle with Rob de Castella at Brisbane and led him until 2 miles from the end. So he's been beaten in the closing stages of a Commonwealth race. He was beaten in the closing stages of the Fukuoka race, and I don't think he wants to be beaten even by Zachariah Barry today. He's going to push on and push on, and I fancy it's going to be a great race between the two of them.
He may have been beaten in those two, but he's won an awful lot as well. He was first in this year's Tokyo Marathon. He won the Los Angeles Marathon this year, and he's also won the African Championship back in '82.
And it's interesting, Brennan, that Zachariah Barry, who's at the University of Texas at El Paso, is one of the growing band of African runners that are making a very good living from now what are legalized rewards for running, especially on the cross-country, especially the 10-kilometer road races. He really has excelled at that, and they do very well out of it.
They do very well out of it, and it's partly to fund their education, and you can't deny that. And the other thing is that when they go back to Tanzania, with the kind of money they can earn running on the roads in America, they can acquire a very, very good living for the future. So there's a dual motivation, and I think you're looking at two people, Ikanga, who's based in Tanzania and who's thinking about the Olympic Games only, and Barry, who's based in America and who's thinking about his own material future. And really, you know, there's no argument with that. The game has changed nowadays, and there are dual rewards to be sought. And I think that we're looking at one guy who's trying to win this race and another guy who's going to run as fast as he can for as far as he can.
Got some news now of the chasing group. That group of 6 or 7 are now 100 meters behind the leaders. The leaders, the two Tanzanians, and then the chasing group 100 meters behind. Bunyan, Murphy, Leek, Graham, Lavenberg of Denmark, and Magnani of Italy. And that other group we saw going through with Charlie Spedding leading it, and including Jerry Helm, last year's second place athlete, they're some 100 meters behind the second group.
Just an interesting note, David, talking to the Italians who were here last night, they said of Magnani that he can run 2 hours 11 anywhere, anytime, almost weekly. He can't put in a sprint finish, but it's interesting that he's about 150 metres back from this leading pair, a very, very consistent runner, capable of 2 hours 11. So that's a guide as to what the wind might be doing, and a guide as to the sort of speed that these two are running.
This is the halfway point, and they're through in about 1:04, and that is very, very quick indeed. Now, the fastest marathon ever run on the all-time list, run by Alberto Salazar of the United States in 2 hours 8, 13 seconds. 2 hours 8 minutes, 13 seconds. And certainly, well, if they can keep hammering along at this sort of pace, the closing stages are very, very fast indeed. They could be close, but one must doubt, in a changing wind, whether it's possible to achieve that.
I think that's absolutely the case, and I mean, looking further back down the field, we're starting to see some kind of turnout here. This is a very popular point for people to come and watch the race, and I think the crowds this year are probably bigger than they've ever been before, and that's a great thing, because the London Marathon is, as you said earlier, becoming established as part of the folklore in Britain, and I don't think that should be allowed, actually. Bikes on the course, so I don't think we should dwell on that too long.
Well, dear old Arthur is 70, Bren, and he's not doing badly. Arthur Rhodes, that is.
Well, we've got the official time now at the halfway stage for the leaders, and it's 1 hour, 4 minutes, 38 seconds. Very, very quick indeed. Meanwhile, as these athletes cross Tower Bridge, one of London's most famous symbols, let's just look back on the history of this worldwide and world-renowned landmark.
HMS Belfast, built in 1938, in the city which name she bears, is the largest cruiser ever built by the Royal Navy. Her sister ship is the Edinburgh, used recently in the Russian gold salvage operation. Just 18 months after HMS Belfast was launched, she triggered off a magnetic mine and had to be almost entirely rebuilt before rejoining the fleet in 1942. Her active career ended in 1964, and a trust was later formed to convert her to a maritime museum, for which she was moved to her present location opposite the Tower of London. Tower Bridge is close by. Although long a symbol for London, it was actually only completed in 1894, when it was opened by the Prince of Wales, later King Edward VII. Costing more than £1 million then, it took 8 years to build, and permission to build the bridge was only given if it were built in the same Norman style as nearby Tower of London. The high pedestrian walkway was closed soon after the bridge opened, and was only reopened to the public just 2 years ago.
So this marathon tour of the sights of London continues.
There are the Vikings still going strong. One or two heavyweights amongst them. They might have preferred rape and pillage today, I'm not sure. It was looking a bit tough.
This is the 6-mile point. Meanwhile, the leaders are through 14 miles.
Good front row forward, just gone through picture. At this part of the race, the questions may have been raised. Why did we start in the first place? The first 6 or 7 miles, the sheer euphoria of being there. And then the questions, and I suppose the question mark was raised, can they get through it?
I must say, that's not reflected in their faces, Ron. They're looking very relaxed indeed. I would say the real question mark arises after about 16, 17 miles on the Isle of Dogs, when they pass that 16-mile marker, and the thought goes through your mind, we've still got 10 to go.
Bernie Clifton just on the left there of the picture. Now he's a regular. It wouldn't be the London Marathon without Bernie, who runs. Look at that. The ostrich with him, and it's a tremendous effort.
Actually, Bernie was saying that the ostrich is going to run a personal best today.
The man I feel sorry for is Lenny Bennett, who trained for this and is a superb marathon runner, and then got a fractured foot, about 6 weeks ago, and was dying to get back into the training again. I'm not certain. I don't think he's running today, but he'll be sitting watching this and regretting it, because he was one of those that was heaven set to run a fast time and also raising a lot of money for charity.
The news from the head of the race is that the 2 leaders have passed the second woman in the race. That's at about 14 miles. And second place at the moment held by Priscilla Welsh of Great Britain, who certainly seems to be running her way into the Olympic team.
Priscilla Welsh, I would remind you, those of you that are contemplating putting your entry forms in, only started jogging 4 years ago, had no athletic potential at school, and here she is at 39. Fighting her way into the Olympic team.
Meanwhile, there's some dramatic news at the head of the race because the Tanzanians are being caught by the chasing British group. You can see them now closing all the time. And as we suspected, the 2 Africans are paying for that dramatic pace between 2 and 8 miles. Magnani of Italy, such an experienced marathon runner. Adrian Leek, I think it is, alongside him. And so the race now is beginning to develop quite dramatically. There's the Church of St George in the east, which is just before the halfway point. They've passed the other side of it now. And there's certainly, the gap is closing with every stride.
What's interesting is that Mayani must be inside his personal best. He's a very experienced athlete. The man there, number 9 on the left. He's 33, former physical education teacher, and he was 13th in the 76 Olympics, 6th in the European Championships at Prague, 8th in Moscow, and a winner of a European Cup in which he beat Sierpinski, the Olympic champion, and John Graham, who's in this race. Now, his best time is 2 hours 11:28. And here he is closing the gap on the Tanzanians, and he may well have paced himself that much better. He may well be running a more intelligent race along with Adrian Leek, and suddenly there is a real international race on.
And Adrian Leek is the surprise party here. Member of Cardiff Athletic Club, he's 26, he's based in America, where so many of our long-distance athletes now train and live. But he's way over his head in terms of time. His best time previously, just inside 2 hours 16, run 2 years ago. And here he is at the moment on course for something inside 2 hours 10 minutes. And the group behind, by no means out of it now. We've got a lot of athletes closing, and the encouragement for them is growing all the time, because they've seen Leek, they've seen Magnani close the gap. They know the Africans are suffering, and the encouragement there now for them to just speed up and get on the back of the leading four.
Tanzania's accelerating away again. Another interesting point about Magnani is that he was the man beaten by Charlie Spedding, Brent, in Charlie's debut marathon. So if he's in the pack just behind them, there's still a chance for more British faces to appear.
That's right, and there are more British faces, and they're not too far down the road. But typically African, they've seen a group catch them, so they've decided, hey, they're catching us, we're going to go quick, and that's exactly what they've done. So they've taken off again, they've increased the pace, they're running at an abnormal pace, they're changing the speed, and that doesn't help you in a marathon. The Italian and the Englishman have decided that they're not going to bother with this acceleration, and hopefully they'll catch them again.
And in fact, the leading girl, Christiansen of Norway, went through halfway on world record pace. She was through halfway in 1 hour, 10 minutes, 53 seconds, but she's not very far in front of these two Africans now. And certainly the response is there. 24 kilometres marked there, and Bari and Ikanga taking liquid on board. So too is Adrian Leek. Magnani accepts it from the other side, but there's a lot of hope there for the chasing group, and we'll have more details of those in just a moment.
And that
the leading lady on her way through the redeveloped area of the Isle of Dogs. That's the timing float for her, and Christensen a long and lonely road, but certainly on course for a new world best.
Spanking brand new road she's running on, that new paved surface, the new buildings, the high-tech buildings that are flourishing there. London's new parkland, 550 acres. The London Docks Development Board really emerging against from the dereliction of the past. Brand new roads, a brand new lung for London.
And of course it makes a significant difference, because the roads in this area were not too good in previous years when the London Marathon has wound its way around the Isle of Dogs. But this is a far better running surface indeed, and of course should affect the time. We've got news now of that group just behind Leek and Magnani. Leek in third place, getting away from the Italian and beginning to close again on the two Africans, who are running most uneconomically, as Brendan Foster said. Their response to any sort of challenge is to just kick and go away, but it's not the way to run a marathon, although, having said that, they may still be good enough to last out the pace and win. But in the group behind Leek and Magnani is Dahl of Norway, a familiar figure in the London Marathon, John Graham of Birchfield, Kevin Foster from the northeast, and Charlie Spedding, his clubmate from Gateshead, and they're all in that group behind Magnani. And that is, well, by no means out of striking distance. They've gone through 15 miles, 11 miles to go, 1 hour, 14 minutes and 9 seconds. The pace has slowed a little bit, and it's about on course at the moment for 2 hours and 10 minutes. The course record set over a slightly different course by Hugh Jones in 1982. Hugh Jones's time, 2 hours, 9 minutes, 24 seconds. What will be worrying Cliff Temple, Mike Grattan's coach, is that Mike Grattan, last year's winner, who was this year's favourite, doesn't appear to be with the leaders at all. Just a brief glimpse there of Chris Brasher, the race director. Chris Brasher, the Olympic steeplechase gold medalist in 1956, now an athletics correspondent, and he and John Disley, a steeplechase international colleague, the brains behind this.
I think they alternate whether they're going to run in it. One does the organising, one does the running. I mean, they both organise it. John Disley was telling me that he's been cycling these roads up till 3 o'clock in the morning to get it absolutely accurate, so that there've been absolutely no doubt that they've got to run 26.2 miles. In fact, if they cut all the corners, they still run the absolute distance of the marathon, the classic distance that we originated in 1908.
A lot of the club athletes now crossing Tower Bridge. About 12 miles.
think he's been recognised. Hello, Wello.
And meanwhile, some 6 miles behind, the last lady, the Italian lady we were looking at earlier at Woolwich, goes through. In fact, she's got a companion there as well now. They're at 6 miles, an astonishing distance already behind the leaders.
Lollipop. Andy Smith just gone through. Thames Hare and Hounds, and now there's an old club, the first club in Great Britain from which the Amateur Athletic Association was founded. The Thames Hare and Hounds, 1963. Andy Smith from Chessington.
Actually, this a group that will probably run around between 3 hours 15 minutes and 3 hours 30 minutes. The peak period for finishers is something like 3 hours 40 minutes. And indeed, at that stage, they're going through the finishing line at about 800 a minute.
And they're still coming past Cutty, Sark. W649, Janet Walmsley. She's 37, from London, unemployed and having the day of her life.
Group Joan Brown, Portsmouth joggers, and also she's accompanied by Wendy Bing of Portsmouth joggers, and I suspect actually that's a small group all from the same club. Now this is still approaching Cutty Sark. I wonder how he's thinking about the 20 miles he's still got to go.
He may be one of those with the question mark, David.
Actually, the news from the head of the race is getting more and more interesting. The Africans are being chased very, very hard by a significant group now. That group includes Charlie Spedding and Kevin Foster of Gateshead. So we've got a completely new challenge by athletes who've possibly placed themselves better. Adrian Leake is paying for his challenge, the Cardiff boy. He's dropped back considerably now, but we've got a new threat to the Tanzanians. There, I think the three there are Charlie Spedding, only one marathon and a winning run. Kevin Foster from the Gateshead Club, Cross Country International as well, and Dahl of Norway. Magnani has dropped off that pack, and so too has Adrian Leake. So the Africans facing a new problem. Well, now from the quickest, we can drop back to the slowest. 194 seems to me to be a familiar figure, actually. That's Karen Wood.
I know 194, David. That's Klaus Bardick. He's 79. He spends his life and the whole of his earnings, or his pension now, on travelling around the world. He's run in Japan, New Zealand, California, and I chatted to him last night. He told the audience of about 4,000 at the pasta party they were too young, they weren't mature enough to run in marathons yet. Klaus Bendick then, 79.
Who comes from Teignmouth, but meanwhile, the race is really developing. $17-mile mark coming up. And the race on. 9 miles to go. They're approaching the feeding station. The tiny Ikanga, the front runner from Tanzania. Bari, better known for his track exploits, alongside him. And now the two Gateshead boys right with them. Kevin Foster's on the right as we look in. Charlie Spedding and Dahl of Norway. Dahl, who's 32 now. Oyvind Dahl, 5th in the Houston Marathon this year. 2nd 2 years ago in this race to Hugh Jones, and 10th last year, a regular visitor. Wearing a vest similar to the Gateshead boys, but not a member of the club.
No, he's not a member of the club, but we'd be quite happy the way he's running to have him in the club, but he's a foreigner and they don't have any foreigners in our club yet.
Just thinking, Brendan, that Charlie Spedding is one of these late developers. The race is full of late developers today, but he didn't really start his international career to what, 30, 31?
Charlie really had a couple of good years recently on the track at 10,000 metres in the Commonwealth and European Championships, and one marathon which he won this year by the thickness of his running vest. And now everything's been geared for this race in London, and he's running better than he's ever run before. His preparation's been better than it's ever been before. He stayed away from all the action. He didn't come into London, centre of London at all. He hasn't even been around the all the goings on. And he arrived and slept in a hotel near Greenwich last night on his own. And he knows exactly what he had to do. He looked at his watch and he had his own plan for the 10-mile marker. And again, even now, they've caught the leading group. Ikanga's done what he did earlier. He's taken off again, and I was very pleased to see both Charlie and Kevin Foster look at each other and almost you could see them decide they were going to let him go.
Significant change there while you were talking, Bren. Bari is in trouble. Ikanga tried to get away, and the man he broke was Bari, his fellow Tanzanian. He's just going through a bad patch at the moment, and it's important for him to stay with that pack, but he's struggling to stay with them, and they seem to be going away with every stride. Charlie Spedding looks very, very comfortable indeed. And meanwhile, some 2 minutes ahead, Ingrid Christiansen is still leading the ladies' race. She went through 17 miles in 1 hour 32 minutes. If she can keep on going like that, she should set a world best time. She's on schedule at the moment for 2 hours 22 minutes. And in fact, it was thought the leading girl would be caught at about 15, 16 miles. But in fact, she's at 17 miles now, passing the feeding station, not bothered at all. Remarkable that she's had a baby in the last 12 months, ran in the race last year not knowing she was pregnant. And of course, recently won that special 10,000 metres race in Oslo, when she beat Greta Weitz, a rare defeat for Greta Weitz, and Zola Budd, you may remember, was in third place.
She's an international cross-country skier, David. That's another interesting thing about her, because she was good enough to feature in the World Championships back in '78. She finished 15th in the 5-kilometre and the 15-kilometre. She was born in Trondheim, up in the north, where the snow lies, and moved down to Stavanger, and that's where she lives now, and has taken up running since then. But a form of cross-country skiing, which in itself is a tremendous test of fortitude.
Right, from the leading lady to the leading men now, and they're approaching the 17-mile mark, and Dahl is in trouble, the Norwegian, so we're now down to a leading bunch of 3. The two Gateshead boys, Charlie Spedding and Kevin Foster, and Ikanga of Tanzania. In 4th place is Dahl. In 5th place now is Bari. 17 is Charlie Spedding, alongside him Kevin Foster, and of course Ikanga now a very familiar figure indeed. The man who set that blistering pace in the Commonwealth Games in Brisbane, but finally faded in the last 2 miles to be caught by Rob Costella. And certainly he's under pressure now, but look at Dahl in 4th place. He really is rocking and rolling and struggling. Christiansen, the leading lady, by the way, averaging under 5:30 a mile. And for these boys, there isn't time for a drink. Ignoring the feeding station, they don't want to break their stride or their rhythm. And I wonder how friendly the two Gateshead boys are.
They're both very, very friendly. They've talked about this race quite a lot. They've got very similar preparations, and they train, you know, occasionally they train together. On a Sunday they go long running together. But there'll be no love lost here, because there probably is only one place available for either one of these two in the Olympic marathon, because I would imagine that Jeff Smith and Hugh Jones will be selected for the Olympic marathon. But I was talking to Kevin yesterday, and he wasn't very happy at all. He had a terrible week. He didn't think he thought he had some kind of infection or something, because he wasn't sleeping very well. And when he actually analysed it, he realised it was the London Marathon approach. It was the London Marathon disease he had, and it's obviously, I'm very pleased to see that that's all it was.
The time at 17 miles was 1 hour 24 minutes 4 seconds. It's still on schedule for something in the region of 2 hours 10 minutes. Check on the leading 5. Well, it's quite a long way back to Tower Bridge. And in fact, the leaders will go under Tower Bridge very shortly as athletes some 10 miles behind go over the overhead. Going through the field, still a number of club runners, but most of these are the fun runners and running in their first marathon. Some news again from the head of the field is that Ikanga has tried to increase the pace again. Spedding seems to be all right, but Kevin Foster perhaps having a bad time momentarily. He looks to be dropping off slightly, but he's digging in, gritting his teeth. He knows if he can run through this, well, there could be hope on the other side.
I think he's taking a shelter from the wind too, David. I think if that wind is still a factor, Kevin's doing the sensible bit and dropping back, getting a toe through.
This is the feeding station, by the way, on the Isle of Dogs. That's Jim Dingwall going through from Scotland. Very, very experienced marathon runner. And the feeding station at Island Gardens, and as the stragglers go through, feeding stations, by the way, are spread along a space of about 100 metres, in fact. They miss out when they see it for the first time. That's Paul Eels gone through, and Alan Cole of Newport Harriers.
These feeding stations being manned by a lot of the local clubs. Docklands set one involved. A lot of local athletic clubs and fraternities in the area, all supporting the London Marathon.
So Foster still digging in just behind Charlie Spedding, but Ikanga's asking the questions once more. He's certainly not running even pace, but he's making life very, very difficult. 18 miles gone. The time, 1 hour, 28 minutes, 53 seconds. That was a 4:59 second mark. They're now about 100 metres behind the leading lady, Ingrid Christiansen. While Ikanga is working like mad to try and break the two Gateshead athletes, and he's just opened up a gap of about 5 metres. Charlie Spedding looking for liquid, and he can't get it. Or is this a sponge he wanted? He wanted a drink badly, he's got it, and he's back with Ikanga, who's also taking liquid on board. Foster didn't have time to call in, but what it has done for him is slow them down slightly, and he's back with them. Ikanga digging in again. A long way behind, some 12 miles behind the oldest competitor in the race, because we understand that Albert Gordon, the American financier, is not running, but I'm not sure that's true. This is Albert Wiseman. You've seen him, Bob Wiseman rather, you've seen him several times before in London marathons. He's now 81. He's still a member of a club, Cambridge Harriers, and comes from Greenwich. And he usually manages to finish. A few of the stragglers still going through in the Cutty Sark area, and still they're coming round the corner. Well, some 6 miles in front. It's a lot busier on Tower Bridge.
And still they pour over the bridge. He was a big fella. 7.373. Ronnie Park, or is it Pank? From Stopsley Striders, Bedfordshire. One of the 1600 engineers. Tim Saunders just gone through from Bristol. David Tyler wearing 980. Oliver Stocken from Sydney, Australia, a banker. F407. I wonder who that is. It's Arabella Woodrow from Bristol. .972 was Gerald Blackmore from Mersham.
The battle's still on for the lead. 3 together. And certainly this 1984 London Marathon will be settled and won by one of these 3. And we're reaching the point now in the race where they're going to start having to make a break. Someone has got to make some sort of move. Ikanga keeps surging, but they keep with it.
Kevin Foster in 3rd place. Looks to me as though he's struggling, but he's grimacing and his head's going side to side. He's glancing across, and I think he's hurting a bit at the moment. But the key for him is just to hang on there as much as he can, because he won't come back now if he gets dropped at this point. Charlie looks very comfortable there, right behind Ikanga. I think he's doing the right thing, because if he runs alongside Ikanga, then Ikanga will just run faster. And if he runs behind him, then there's a chance that Ikanga will go a more consistent and a more solid pace. But you're looking at this Tanzanian, he's one of the very, very best marathon runners in the world. And I would think that Charlie would have 2 things in his mind. One would be Olympic selection, and the other one would be possibly thinking about winning the race.
Brendan, interesting that the background of the British boys is more likely to be cross-country than road running. As Kevin Foster, they're 4th in the national, 34th in the international. Charlie, good background of cross-country. Just interesting how the build-up is rather different from different countries.
But all the British athletes always start their running on the cross-country scene, and end up as in marathon runners after they do that.
On the left, by the way, there's Ingrid Christiansen, the leading lady. Some of the other athletes are on their way out around the Isle of Dogs loop. The chasing men, well, we were told they were about 100 metres behind. It looks a bit longer, but Ikanga there, it's significant that he's got about 5 metres.
Interesting too, David, that they were to have closed the gap at where? 14, 15, 16 miles, and she's keeping them off. She's running brilliantly.
I did mention that earlier, in fact, and it looks as if it's going to be 20 miles at least before they actually catch her. And in fact, the gap, we were told it was 100 metres, but in fact, it's about 41 seconds. Now, they've got a target there, which is quite interesting. Once she gets into sight, well, they're going to have to start chasing, but it's certainly going to be 20 miles or beyond before they catch her.
I mean, everyone should be surprised that it's taken them so long to catch her, because she's running at under 2:20 pace, which no woman's ever run anywhere near that before. So we're actually seeing quite a historic run anyway. Even this 20-mile time must be an incredible time for a woman. So all the calculations obviously could never take that into consideration. And I just wonder if Ingrid is going to be any disadvantage when she gets passed by a group of men who are running. Obviously, they're running a bit faster.
Well, she's on the way, and so too the guards band on the mile. Changing of the guard, of course, the time is changed on Marathon Day, and the band of the Grenadier Guards marching down the mile after the changing of the guard. Back at the tower, they're still streaming over there. And there's a man running backwards there. Doesn't help us very much. Thanks very much. Let's have a look at his number. 2468.
He's the only one that's remembered his number all morning.
That's David Shaw. It comes from Ashford, an engineer. And if you're interested in fairly irrelevant stats, there are more engineers in this race than any other profession.
Well, I'm pleased you told me about the engineers, David, because I would never have known otherwise. Again, we hear there's some change at the front of the race, where we hear that for the first time Ikanga's been headed and Spedding has taken the lead. So we'll come, and we can actually see them now that Charlie Spedding for the first time has hit the front. And this is much earlier than he thought he might have to, but if he's feeling good and Ikanga's not feeling so strong, then why not do it? He's obviously full of confidence. Kevin Foster, sadly in third place, looks as though at the same time he's struggling, but obviously Charlie is feeling strong and he's opening up a gap and he looks great, and I'm getting too excited to talk anymore.
Brendan, I've just got to say, he looks magnificent. I've never seen Charlie look better at any part of the race. He really is having a day of days today.
Well, Charlie Spedding only one marathon behind him, a winning marathon, although it was a photo finish with Magnani in Houston, I think it was, when he ran 2:11.54. He's certainly running faster than that today, but certainly it looks to be a fairly prodigious marathon talent. Christiansen, the leader in the ladies' race. And it's interesting to see if the men got her in sight, and they have. They're closing very rapidly. Now, Christiansen may well be slowing at this stage of the race. She's gone very, very quickly indeed. Charlie Spedding is now making the move that matters. He's trying to break them. His only experience of the marathon was a very painful one, but a very rewarding one, because he got a substantial cash prize as a result of a photo finish.
Yeah, and we all had a party when he came home with it, and that was his big cash prize that he won in Houston in Texas. But he's passed Ingrid Christiansen there, and she's obviously not taking any notice at all because she's running her own race on the left-hand side of the road, and he's now striking out for maybe a run for glory. But he knows he'll be watching, he's looking at his watch all the time. He knows exactly what he's got to do. He's a very, very experienced runner. And all right, today's his 26-mile marathon that he's only run once before, but he ran 28 miles in training last weekend, or the weekend before last. So he's got the distance in his legs. He's got the speed, as good a speed as anybody else in this race at 10,000 meters. So he's obviously, he knows what he's doing. He's feeling strong, and he's running tremendously well.
I just wonder, Brad, whether Ingrid Christiansen will have got relief from the fact that she's just been overtaken at last, because although she's on a incredibly fast schedule, she may not have known exactly how fast she was running. She might have expected the men to have overtaken her before this, and it might be some relief that Charlie's just gone by.
She would have expected the men to come past her earlier, but she's obviously had split times from the side of the road, and now it looks like they've got problems with two timing trucks on the road at the same time.
Well, anxious waves there from Chris Brasher, who's trying to get the camera car out of the way, which means, of course, that we haven't got any shots at this moment, apart from the heli-tele shot. Incidentally, it was interesting watching the two milk floats with the timing gear on. They're running absolutely in sync, 10 minutes apart, a tribute to the meticulous organisation at the start.
That's a lonely figure of Charlie Spedding now. He really has broken away. Tremendous lead.
Well, it's only a couple of years ago that Charlie won his first major race on the track at Crystal Palace. And I remember we celebrated that night in the commentary box to some tune, and he too did it afterwards. And since then, he's become a genuine international athlete. He ran in the Commonwealth Games. He was also put in 4th place in the 10,000 metres, 8th in the European Championship, missed out on the World Championship, but now he's stepped up in distance, and I think he's found his true vocation. Marathon running, and when you think, as I said on that winning night at Crystal Palace, of the miles he's got in those legs, this is a just reward. The Island Gardens feeding station at 17 miles, and these athletes all running very respectable times. In fact, looking back, some 20 athletes, I think, went under 2:20 last year, which is very, very good marathon running. And some of these athletes are way, way inside 2:30. A lot of these athletes looking in reasonable order. But in case you've just switched on, we can bring you up to date with the story as it's developed.
A world record field of 21,000 set off from 2 starts either side of Blackheath Common at 9:30 this morning and provided once again one of the most impressive sights in British sport. In one group were the less experienced women athletes, the slower men, and the men running a marathon for the first time. Ahead of them, their incredible journey of 26 miles, 385 yards. In the other group were the elite men, those with proven records over this classic distance, and many with their sights on the Olympics this summer. There was the usual turnout of novelty runners, but it was clearly no honeymoon even for them. At Cutty, Sark, between 6 and 7 miles, the first of the masses of fun runners passed through in a little over 3/4 of an hour. Ahead of them at about 12 miles was the leader in the women's race, Ingrid Christensen of Norway, who was on course for the fastest women's marathon ever run. She was now out alone after running for most of the way with Mary Cotton of Birchfield Harriers. The leading men, meanwhile, were both from Tanzania, Ikanga and Bari, who set off at a very fast pace, but as they turned into the wind, that pace was beginning to slow. Another race within the race is for wheelchair competitors, and after an hour, Kevin Breen of Ireland was out in front. So, after just over an hour and approaching halfway, it was the Tanzanians still ahead, but while the gap was there to the chasing bunch, the leaders were not, as has been proved, uncatchable.
A lovely sight of Tower Bridge, and it won't be long before Charlie Spedding, the leader, will have that in sight. He really is bouncing along, and there's no doubt at all that Ikanga once more has paid the penalty for reckless pacemaking. The early stages too fast. Spedding, although only running his second marathon, so experienced at distance running that he waited and had the courage to wait. It takes nerve to run at even pace, and I suspect Charlie's been doing that.
Well, his whole plan was to run at even pace, and it was obvious in the first 10 miles that he was doing that, because whilst we saw the Tanzanians running in 4:45 and 4:49 pace, he was obviously sitting there just under 5-minute pace, which is obviously helping him now. But the race is by no means over yet, and there are still people who are well within his shot, because you know the great marathon runners, Ron Hill and like that, tell you that the halfway point in a marathon is 22 miles, not 13 miles, which is the geographical half point. So there's still an awful lot of running to be done by Charlie Spedding as he goes through the Tower Dock area.
Actually, that top shot was of the tunnel that he was just going through there. Charlie Spedding now in shade and probably enjoying the cool. It's remarkable the difference actually in temperature when you go from shade into sunlight, even on a cool day with the temperature below 60 today. He's coming now towards St Catherine's Dock, one of London's most popular tourist attractions.
The Tower of London, the city's most famous landmark, was built by William the Conqueror for the purpose of protecting and controlling the city. The White Tower, the oldest building within the Precepts, is over 900 years old. Presently, the tower attracts over 3 million visitors a year, who pass through the middle tower and over the causeway to the Byward Tower, which gave its name to the password, or byword, needed before permission for entry was granted. History is full of famous names of people who were imprisoned and lost their heads here. Their last fateful journey started on the Thames at infamous Traitor's Gate, now closed. And after disembarking, they were led through St Thomas's Tower to the block. Today, visitors have little to fear from the yeoman warders, or beef-eaters, as they're now known. That moat surrounding the tower is now dry, and was added in the 13th century. Much later came St Catherine Dock, completed in 1827. For more than 100 years, it was the closest dock to the City of London, specialising in valuable cargoes such as ivory, silver and spices. Berthed here is another famous landmark, HMS Discovery, the ship in which Scott made his epic voyage to the Antarctic in 1901. It was built in Dundee, especially for the expedition, but was later used for carrying cargo to America and munitions to Russia during the First World War. Discovery was formerly moored on the Victoria Embankment and only moved here to St Catherine Dock in 1980. Now, many historic sailing ships are moored here, and there are 6 ships from the early days of steam, which are open to visitors. The original warehouse, Ivory House, has now been carefully converted into modern apartments, shops, chandleries and restaurants. The coronarium marks the site of the first chapel of St. Catherine, built in medieval times. And Catherine Dock is still a working dock and marina. On a high tide during the summer months, up to 90 boats pass through these locks.
There, the view of St. Catherine's Dock. And from this point, he's got just over 3 miles to go. He's not very far to go now before going through the dock itself, and then onto the painful cobbles by Traitor's Grey. Charlie Spedding, and let's see if we can check the gap there between first and second. Actually, through the dock, past those historic sailing ships, and then he comes towards the Dutch bridge. And perhaps if we stay there just for a moment, we may be able to see the second athlete and the gap, but it looks considerable, and he looks back to see where the second man is, and in fact we can't see him. So this could be a winning break.
Through the tunnel by the Tower Hotel, past St. Catherine Dock, a marvellous example of regenerated London. Charlie Spedding. And what a turnout by London again. It's got to be 300 yards. The next runner. The break has been emphatic, and there he is. And it's his teammate, Kevin Forster. Gateshead having a great day.
Well, Gateshead, one of the great distance clubs in the country, and emphasising that today. And the gap is not so big. That's an interesting shot. It's given us the first indication, in fact, that the race is not over by any means. I would think on foreshortening there, that gap is only about 50, 60 metres. So Charlie Spedding is by no means safe. Foster's gone through his bad period, and in third place is Kanga. Kanga with Foster in his sights, and there could be a considerable battle yet. Not one of these athletes can afford to weaken. Foster had that bad time, dropped away from the leading two. He's clearly recovered. And Christensen beginning to suffer. The early pace, she's tiring, but she's still looking extremely strong. About 3 miles left to go.
Well, the occasion has been matched by the weather and the crowd. And there's some on their way out and some on their way back. And Ingrid Christensen, the 27-year-old Norwegian girl, who's been on her own from about 6 miles on. Clearly tiring a little, as well she might, after setting that incredibly fast pace. Only so recently overtaken by the leading men.
Still 3 long miles to go for her. But she does look extremely strong. Greta Weitz, of course, has ruled long distance running for a long time, but now the Norwegians have another great athlete. It looks to me like the fourth man just behind, and is that Adrian Leake? See as he comes through. And in fact, Dennis Fells, that is another Cardiff athlete, followed by Dahl of Norway, and those cobbles really are painful. You saw Dahl lurching on it.
They're looking for an easy path here. Those cobbles are hurting.
That's Ray Crabb going through at Bristol. And these athletes all running very fast times. This is an athlete we saw a lot of early on, Chris Bunyan of Southampton and Eastleigh. Followed by number 10 there, Malcolm East. And just behind him is John Graham of Birchfield, who was with the early leaders. The Yeoman Warder, or the Beefeater, taking an interest. So they go on their way, about 3 miles left. Island Gardens feeding station. There at the 17-mile mark. And it's a daunting thought for many of them. Still 9 to go.
That's right. Whilst the leaders are thinking about the end, the mass of the field are still thinking about completing the course, and they're thinking about the 10 miles or so that lie ahead of them. And that's the difference between the one end of the race and the other end of the race. One's about position and time, the other one's about survival and completion of the course.
10,000 sponges will be given out. Special marathon bottles, pre-filled for the invited runners. That's the top 2,000. But bags of water, 500,000 cups will be dispensed from these 23 aid stations.
Athletes still streaming across Tower Bridge. And down below them, some 10 miles ahead, the leading groups going past Traitor's Gate.
Howard Ballard wears 974 from Coventry. An American there. Thomas Athanasius, 322 from Queens in New York. Mike Coleman is there, wearing 722. And now coming into the Blackfriars underpass, there's Mike Grattan wearing number 1 at the Tower. Just gone through Mike Grattan, last year's winner. We saw Mike Grattan wearing the red, wearing 001. There he is with the beard in the middle in the red shirt. Came through his tunnel and now has emerged. Jerry Helm has gone through last year's second place. But that has blown Mike Grattan's Olympic hopes for sure. There he is wearing number 1. Mike Grattan, who had a marvellous day here last year.
Leader Charlie Spedding. I wonder what the gap is now. So he got his 23-mile time, 1 hour 53 minutes 40 seconds, and at the moment that brings him inside, or should bring him inside, 2 hours 10.
Quite cool in the shade, but it's certainly more than 100 metres the lead now. Charlie Spedding, the man going away. The river looking quite calm. It probably means the wind has dropped. It's not whipping up any waves at all. They'll be grateful for that. It's cool, but the sun is out. Absolutely first-class conditions, really. If that wind hasn't affected them too much, it'll certainly help the tail-enders if the sun keeps out and the wind drops just a little. Sun not that hot.
Just looking back on the previous marathons, the first London Marathon The course has changed slightly, by the way. Was a dead heat between Simonsen and Beardsley, Simonsen of Norway and Beardsley, United States, in 2 hours 11 minutes 48 seconds. Hugh Jones in 82 set the course record, 2 hours 9 minutes 24, and that was the fastest marathon, and still is the fastest marathon ever run in this country. And last year, Mike Grattan won in 2 hours 9 minutes 43. I think actually conditions in the previous 3 years have been slightly better for marathon running than they have been today, because this wind has been uncomfortable. It may have helped on occasions, but it's also hindered. And the wind does affect rhythm in many ways. Well, Kevin Foster, going past Traitor's Gate, was within sight of Charlie Spedding, but he seems to have disappeared completely. And Charlie Spedding really can afford to relax and coast, because the time in a marathon, if you're winning it, is totally unimportant. What is vital for him is to finish, and he'll certainly get a place in the Olympic team.
He looks really strong there, and I think you're right that he's now concentrating on finishing in good form rather than trying to bust a gut and try and run a personal best time. And we can see the comfortable rhythm that he's running. He's staying that safe distance from the side of the curb and everything, and he's looking really strong, and he's a really good athlete. I mean, apart from being a good marathon runner, this is his second marathon race, and it looks like he's on the way to his second marathon victory. He's also a good class cross-country road runner and everything, and he's a good lesson for others to learn, because in his early career he was a very promising youngster in English schools, 1500 metres, international schools, 1500 metres, but he then had a couple of years of serious injury where he had operations on his Achilles tendons, so there is a way back after years out of the sport through injury, and he's showing people that at 31 years old, moving up gradually, running the race conservatively and sensibly, looking at his watch and watching his time, that this is a great way to do it.
Waterloo Bridge, and shortly he'll turn right into Northumberland Avenue. And perhaps at some stage we'll be able to see the battle for second and third places. Just getting a quick check on his time. He's gone through 24 miles in 1 hour 58 minutes 36 seconds. The course record 2 hours 9 minutes 24, and he's not so far outside it. A lot will depend on his attitude now in the closing 2 miles, whether he feels he's done enough or whether he realizes he's close to the record and wants to hammer it out. He's certainly looking strong enough to do it, but whether he'd be wise to do it is another question, because a marathon is punishing and it takes a long time to recover. And the Olympics, of course, now within sight for Charlie Spedding.
Also in sight, as he passes Cleopatra's Needle, will be Admiralty Arch and the Mall. And talking to the non-specialist runners, they regard that as home. Whether they hit a wall or not, once they're in the Mall, they know that the end is in sight, and that view will be coming up for Charlie Spedding very soon now. And the certain knowledge that there's no one else in sight, and that he's booked his place to Los Angeles, and it's been a marvellous day. A view you won't get of Charing Cross Station. The embankment underneath, Northumberland Avenue ahead.
Just watching on that shot as Charlie Spedding goes on his way up Northumberland Avenue, it may be useful if we can spot second and third.
Next landmark, Trafalgar Square.
And Nelson's column towering it there. You can see that above the heads of the spectators. And then he turns left through Admiralty Arch and into the Mall. Now that's an unofficial drinking station, I think, but anything goes at this stage. The left turn and through the Admiralty Arch. And in fact we can see the second man there, and it does look to me as if that is still Kevin Foster. And so the view from Buckingham Palace down the Mall. The outriders clearing the way, but this is so well fleeced. And what a majestic feeling this must be. The mile and the lonely figure of Charlie Spedding. For him, well, one could say almost a royal occasion. The palace ahead, a long distance ahead. The Queen Victoria statue, and Chris Brayshaw says, good old Charlie. The words came through quite clearly, and he's now a mile from the finish. As he comes through Admiralty Arch, in fact, it's 1 mile, 385 yards. That's as Charlie Spedding sees Buckingham Palace and the Victoria Monument. A lovely sight on this sunny morning, but the temperature in the mid-50s. There's the second man, Kevin Foster. What a day for Gateshead. Charlie Spedding looking much more relaxed, but of course that's always the case when you are winning. Kevin Foster's had his bad patches, but he's battled through them.
Well, I was out running with Charlie this week, and we actually talked about what would happen if you were coming up the mile on Sunday, and he said, well, what I'll do is I'll probably run in the middle of the road. And he is in the middle of the road, and the crowds are supporting him, and he's obviously tired. There's no question about that. But he looks really composed. He looks very, very strong. He doesn't seem to be excessively sweating. He isn't blowing hard. And I think if he's thinking about times, I think he'd be very happy with under 2 hours 10 minutes. But I don't think he'd bust a gut to shave a second or two off the time he can do. And when he turns around and sees Kevin Foster, he'll celebrate. He said he wouldn't. He said he'd try and keep composed. And if this happened, he said he promised not like in this big 5,000 metres victory at Crystal Palace when he grimaced when he crossed the line. He promised he wouldn't grimace today.
Keep the clock running there as the third man comes through, Ikanga. And who's back in fourth place? I think it might have been Dahl of Norway, judging by the vest, but we'll know in a moment. Charlie Spedding turning left now, past the Victoria Monument. And that's the fourth athlete, Dennis Fowles of Cardiff, who's come through very, very late in the race. He's obviously done most of his running in the last 10 miles. And it looks as if he might take Ikanga.
Yes, I should think, Brennan, in a quieter moment, Charlie might just be ticking off in his mind some of the great names he's beaten today. Not just winning a race, but he's put behind him some of those who were fancied for medals in Los Angeles.
Into birdcage walk. And that's Christiansen, Ingrid Christiansen of Norway. Still a mile and 385 yards to go. Passing through the shadow beneath Admiralty Arch and along the mile.
And there are some very experienced men marathon runners behind this young lady. If Charlie Spedding is contemplating the men he's beaten today, this girl has taken about 21,000 scalps. An astonishing run. John Disley just walked across, so neither John Disley or Chris Brayshaw running the race today. The two organisers just went across to congratulate her, Ingrid Christiansen of Norway.
The world best, of course, for a woman is Joan Benoit. And Charlie Spedding now almost within sight of the finish. This is a long, gentle climb. You'd hardly notice it, in fact, on an ordinary day, but at the end of 26 miles, you do feel it. Striding happily, a birdcage walk, and around the corner, the beckoning finger of Big Ben, and the finish on Westminster Bridge. And of course, Also around the corner now for Charlie Spedding, the Olympic Games. Kevin Foster turns into birdcage walk. And he must be wondering at this moment, and I'm sure it's going through his mind, whether he's run well enough, in fact, to get one of the Olympic places. Jeff Smith and Hugh Jones, our two fastest marathon runners in the past 6 months, have both opted not to run today. And the selectors have a difficult job. Ingrid Christensen has slowed in these closing stages. Her target, 2 hours, 22 minutes, 43 seconds. So, Charlie Spedding, the Gateshead Harrier, and he's been one since being a youngster, goes home. Ikanga in third place, and Dennis Fowles fourth. So just yards to go now for Charlie Spedding, 31 years old, and this the greatest victory of his life. The timing car has moved aside. It's past the 26-mile mark. Just the last 385 yards to go. Big Ben in sight, and the time showing something around 2 hours, 10 minutes. The race starting back at Blackheath Common at 9:30. This is the final climb, and the welcome sight of the marathon finish.
Here comes the winner, the 1984 Mars London Marathon. Welcome, Charlie Spedding of Gateshead Harriers.
The announcement for the benefit of the spectators there. The band of the Gurkhas playing in the background. Urged on by Chris Brasher, the race director, looking tired. That final climb is hurting his legs. He's outside the course record, but this, not just a personal best, but a very, very fine run indeed. It wins the London Marathon for Charlie Spedding and takes him to the Olympic Games in Los Angeles. As his clubmate Max Colby, who was injured and couldn't run in the race. And if he turns round now, they'll see another Gateshead Harrier on the way through the finish.
Just the first signs of wilting there, but the smile was there as he crossed the line, Max to greet him, and then suddenly he just wilted. But if he looks around, there's his clubmate.
Coming to Parliament Square now.
Tough run, the pair of them. Planned it together, raced much of the way together. Has a look over his shoulder, and it's going to be England 1, 2 and 3, or at least there's a Welshman there, the Cardiff man, because Ikanga's been overtaken.
What a battle Kevin Foster's had with himself. He's really been in trouble for the last 6 or 7 miles, and this has been a display of courage. It's not been easy for him. Looking back anxiously, but I believe him to be safe. He's only 25. Best marathon time previously, 2 hours, 14 minutes, 19 seconds. So he's way inside there. Heavy-legged, but no doubt happy.
Big welcome to Kevin as he comes through all the finish.
So Kevin Foster finishes, tired but happy, and Gateshead first and second. Now who's going to be third? Fowles of Cardiff was very close to Ikanga, and Ikanga's been split in the closing moments. There's Dennis Fowles in third place, Dard is in fourth place. We'll pick up the fifth man in a moment, and Ikanga back in sixth. As Dennis Fowles, who stormed through the field in the closing stages, 33 years old, member of Cardiff Athletic Club, and he comes into third place. Dahl of Norway is fourth. Dahl in fourth place, and in fifth place, hidden slightly, is Lavenborg of Denmark. Meanwhile, the battle going on for second place in the ladies' race, and at the moment Priscilla Welsh looks to be booked for the Olympic Games. She's very, very tired. Some long way behind Christiansen of Norway, who's the leading girl, and it'll be interesting to see what time Christiansen finishes in. She's slowed dramatically in the closing stages. And clearly Priscilla Welsh having problems there, but in no danger of not finishing. Well, there's the timing device that leads the ladies' race, and it's clear she's not going to set a world best, but it's going to be possibly a record for the London Marathon.
There's Ingrid Christiansen, just behind her own clock. She knows she slowed over the last part of the race, but it's been a very, very brave day for this girl.
Greta Weitz's record for the London Marathon, 2 hours, 25 minutes, 29 seconds, and that record appears to be in danger. Ingrid Christiansen is paying, I think, for what was a quite dramatic early pace. She was through the halfway inside a world best time. Now speeding, or trying to speed, as she sees the clock and seconds ticking away. But certainly this will be a new ladies' London Marathon record, and probably the second fastest marathon by a lady in history. And certainly Ingrid Christiansen goes now into the record books. This, the second fastest marathon ever run by a girl.
Marvellous run. Sarah Roll is in third place behind Priscilla Welsh. The two British girls have had a great battle. Priscilla Welsh will be chasing her lifetime best, and Sarah Roll, 9th last year, has a best of 2:39, so she could still set a lifetime best. The two British girls in second and third, going for their fastest times ever. Here's Priscilla Welsh, 39, remember. No athletic potential at school, took up jogging 4 years ago, running her way into the Olympic team. County Hall greets the winner. County Hall responsible for a great deal of the organisation. The GLC having done a marvellous job, along with the organisers, Braysher and Disley.
That ladies' result, though, the second fastest marathon in history, is one of the great runs of all time, Ron, you know, because Joan Benoit, when she did 2:22 in Boston, was assisted by 30-mile-an-hour winds at some place in the course, and this has been a circular course. There's no way the winds helped here, and that's got to be one of the great runs of all time, and I would think a Norwegian record and having Greta White's time beaten just shows you how great this girl is.
How great they've improved at marathon running, what with Greta Weitz and now Ingrid Christiansen.
Looks like the first of the Chinese to finish there. It should be Su Liang. In fact, it's not, though. It's Xu Chun. Perhaps Su Liang has gone through. Xu Chun of China, a 2:18 man who's also run a personal best. All these athletes coming through in very fast times indeed. These athletes pounding their way up Birdcoach Walk, all going to finish inside 2 hours 20 minutes. So 93 last year, finished inside 2:20. Mike Grattan, last year's winner, but no joy for him this year. 2 hours 17:25. I think he went to the finish in that time. Compared to this time last year, 2 hours 9:43. But of course, he's had some injury problems in the meantime.
1:49 coming through. Kevin Johnson of England. Mark Sorensen of Denmark. 144 finishing. Edmund Turner. Johnny begins to streak through. 0-1-2-1.
Coming up to the finish, number 39 is Joakinson of Norway, followed by Nick Braun. Paul Kenny there of Inverness, finishing very strongly indeed, also inside 2:20. Barry, the long-time leader, he's had a battle to finish. And certainly he ran that first 17 miles far too quickly. Better known as a track runner, but time for a smile.
Bonham Brown of England finishing 1:51.
And this is where the Southern Navigators, the Orienteers, come into their own at the finish, 300 of them. The pre-shoot marshals, barkers, pluckers and spindlers. And they'll be working there for the next 3 or 4 hours.